Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee with Tamara. That is me, your host. For those of you who are new, welcome. Let me tell you a little bit about me, although I suspect you know something, otherwise, you wouldn't be here. I am your host on this podcast. I love this podcast. I've been doing it for years because I get to deep dive, answer your questions, and interview incredible people out there. And most importantly, I get to hear from you, which means that the chat bar is open during the live session and the phone number to call in questions is open if you want to submit your questions ahead of time as well. That number is all over our website, so you can go look at it there. I am digging into this topic today, which is the traps that kill a culture of innovation. And I know on my promo I said 4, but I actually have 5 because there's one I just cannot leave out. And I think it's going to be an everyday game changer for you. So as I said, I'm Tamara. I'm your host. Got a little bit off a tangent on this being my favorite thing ever to do. I have been in innovation business entrepreneurship for 25 years now. If you walk your carts down the aisle of Target, you pass products that I've had at hand in rebranding, bringing to life, igniting, new product development, all of it. I'm really proud of a lot of the work that I've done, but also the people, most importantly, really the people that I've worked with. I believe in human-centered innovation. I believe that innovation shouldn't be a process or an initiative, that it should be up here in your brain. The research and the science shows that we all have this ability to be incredible innovators, but we don't all use it. Now, I'm about to dig in to the 4 traps because I want to use your time wisely and give you the most for your time. Before I dig in, I got a couple of questions in the chat bar. Thank you for joining us live. Yes, first of all, it goes on to all the podcast players tomorrow. So we do it live. It's almost like a syndicated show, and then we do it on the podcast players. Someone was asking me, what are those shoes in the background? Of other side. Sometimes I forget their screens mirrored, right? Those are my original boxing shoes. When I first joined martial arts when I was 17 or 18, I found this gym, this incredible human who ran it, Frank Scalercio, who became an incredible mentor to me. And it was a Taekwondo / kickboxing boxing gym. And I have the symbol of our gym, the fist with the leaves, on my ankle, but I keep those forever. Those are my original boxing shoes. Those are the first shoes that I owned when I started getting into the ring. And they are actually, as you can tell, they're wrestling shoes. That's what we used to wear. I don't know if they still do. But yeah, so they're just a reminder that sometimes you're capable more than you think you are, and that you can do hard things, and that things that may seem off limits or not for you may actually be something that you absolutely love. So yes, yes, I used to fight. And mostly guys, because at that time there weren't that many girls, actually barely any girls in boxing, just to age myself a little bit. So yeah, so now you want to know if I got knocked out. Yeah, I got knocked out a few times. And here's the fun part about it is, here's what I learned, by the way. Okay, here's the insight that I had. Are you ready for it? So I used to fight guys all the time because that's all there were. So, and I was, in the middle in terms of weight. It didn't really matter because I just had to fight guys. So my weight class was not irrelevant. Like I didn't fight heavyweights, but whether they were lightweight or featherweight or middleweight, like I fought all of it. Here's what I learned. I was never going to be stronger than a guy. So I was never going to outpunch him, right? His left was always going to catch me if I was at that right place because his strength was going to outdo me, right? That's what used to knock me out, is when I fought normally. Here's what I discovered. Their strength was also their weakness, and then their weakness would become my strength. So what I used to do is I used to get up and on the inside, because once I was inside, right, they can't punch me hard, they can't get the power on me, but I could just go after them with uppercuts and hooks, and like I could just go for it on the inside. But if I was up close to them, they couldn't use their power on me. So yeah, mic drop. There you go. Out of the gate, there's the insight. If you want to win in life, think about how your weakness can become your advantage, and think about how your competitor's strengths can actually be a weakness. So up and on the inside, That's what I always used to do, because I knew if I just stood at at a normal range from them, that I would get knocked the F out, which is what I did several times until I realized what was going on. So your weakness is your strength. Okay, let's talk about the 4 traps that kill a culture of innovation and how to avoid them. And actually, like I said, it's 5 because I have a bonus one in here for you because I think it's so important. And in fact, I think it's so important that I'm actually going to start with it and then work my way to the other 4. Ask your questions, share your wisdom. I believe in the collective wisdom. You're all everyday innovators out there. So let's make sure that we're being the rising tide that lifts all boat and helping each other, okay? All right, so the first trap to avoid that absolutely kills innovation. This is the bonus one that wasn't even in my original script, but I can't help myself. The first one is launch and abandon. Avoid it at all costs. So, all right, here's what happens oftentimes, okay, with innovation efforts is, and I get these calls all the time, is people will, hold on, I'm fixing my mic real quick. Yeah. Thank you. I caught that too. All right, that's better. So number 1, bonus 1, avoid, launch, and abandon. Here's what happens. People call me all the time with this. They say, I need to drive a culture of innovation. I need my people to be more high performing. I need them to solve their problems, not let them sit until they become big problems, right? We're missing opportunities left, right, and center. We're not working well together. We have a toxic culture or a siloed culture, and we need you to come in and fix it. And I'm like, great, let me tell you about the everyday innovator method that we have, which is this, starts with discovery and it goes to ignite and then build and then thrive and kind of repeat, right? You kind of keep doing it. So it's very agile. And they'll say, well, we have this event coming up. So we're thinking you could come in for an hour and a half and do the event. And I'm like, great, of course, I'll do whatever fits for you. And you're going to experience launch and abandon. I know those of you listening right now get it, because what happens? Well, what happens is we get people all excited, right? We fire up those engines. We get people riled up, and then we cut it off. We turn off the engines. And then we wonder why people go back to business as usual, to their old routines, their old habits, their old way of thinking, why they brush those problems under the rug again and avoid those opportunities or look the other way or don't work well together after a week after the event. Well, it's because we launch and abandon. Building cultures, first of all, is from the ground up. And second, it takes continuum of work. It takes time. I was talking to a client of mine that I greatly admire the other day, and he's at the VP level. And so he's very senior and he's been there and he's done that. He's seen a lot of things and he leads a very successful team. He's such a good leader. He's one of the best leaders I've ever seen. And he said, the challenge is we don't create a continuum of education. So we get people together, we do this one-time thing, and then we drop the ball on them and then we get mad at them. So we do another event where we do the same thing. So event-based innovation doesn't work in your favor. I think it's why our fractional consulting or fractional innovation officer service offering is so successful right now, is because more and more companies are realizing, hey, we need the benefits of someone really overseeing our innovation efforts. And I'm not talking new product development I'm not talking just pipeline work or research. I'm talking the culture of innovation and the culture of performance. In fact, I call myself a fractional innovation and performance officer, because it's not just about innovation and the culture, it's about building high-performing everyday innovators across your organization, right? When both of those rise up, it's the rising tides that lift all boats. That's my favorite phrase ever, but like more of it, and you get exponential results from it. So avoid launch and abandon and avoid event-based innovation and performance approach. It is going to bite you in the ass every single time. You're going to get results for a week and then it's going to go off because we've cut off the engines. We are mad at our people, but we're the ones who cut off the engines on them. So great start. I always, like, every time I do a keynote, I work really hard to get some ahas and give tactics that people can implement immediately, like I am on this podcast today. But you got to know that this is a continuum. I love how my client said that. It's a continuum of work, and you got to continually put in the effort. You don't plant seeds in your garden once, never water them, never pull out the weeds. I don't know about you, but I'm pulling weeds every single weekend. I'm tending to garden. I don't even have a big garden because it's not my thing. I have a small garden, but it still takes effort and time. It takes constant watering. It takes fertilization. It takes me pulling weeds every now and again or trimming back things. Like, I have to do stuff in my garden is my point. You can tell that I'm not a gardener with my analogy, but I think you all get my point. You can't just plant the seeds or water it once and then walk away. And that's what we often do. So my first trap to avoid, that's actually my bonus trap that I couldn't do this podcast without doing after I was kind of thinking about this, is avoid, launch, and abandon. Use a continuum of work. Get a fractional innovation and performance offer, or do a long-term consulting engagement. We do a lot of those too, where we go for longer term to drive innovation with people's teams. It's so important. In today's world that is chaotic and changing and commoditized, you can't afford not to continue to be innovative. And I think the thing that's kind of cool about that concept, right, if this is new to you, this fractional officer, is you get all the benefits without the full-time commitment. I work with sometimes really, really big companies, like they have new product development. They have training, like our learning and development. They have all these things. So they don't need another full-time person, but they need the work. Or I find with smaller companies, whether you're 1 million, 10 million, I think usually they're in the like probably 10 to 50 million range. It's like they can't really afford a full-time person that's not bringing a product to market, so to speak, but they need this to continue to grow, right? They're seeing the momentum kind of stall out because what got them here isn't going to get them there. So big companies are like, yeah, we need this. We need someone focused on this. And we've got all these other people. So we need someone who can kind of plug into these people. And also for the mid or small size companies, maybe you can't afford it, but you know you need it, right? You can see it in your people. You're starting to see the problems. Years ago, I worked for White Way Foods and Silk Soy Milk and a bunch of other products they brought to market that you probably know. And I worked with them at a time where they had gone from an entrepreneurial founder to a big company. And they brought in all of these Fortune 500 people from Procter & Gamble, General Mills, like who were kind of steeped in process. And what happened was I don't want to say they lost their way, but if you talk to the employees from that time, they'll tell you it lost its innovative spirit. And there was nobody manning the ship, right? There was nobody making sure that innovation, that culture, and that spirit that they grew on, that they were founded on, continued on as they grew. And so it went away. And their products and their margins and their profits and their market share, like it all showed. And I know a few people who jumped ship and went off to kind of bigger startups. And by startups, I mean pretty established startups, not like out of a garage, because they wanted that innovation. So if you're in that mid-sized company and you're starting to see that status quo sink in, right? You need people with structure and process who have big time experience, but you can't lose that innovation. And big companies, here's the thing that's interesting, by the way, for big companies is here's what I'm seeing across the board is engagement is high at the senior levels and maybe even high manager levels, director level. And it is dropping off at the frontline levels, at the lower levels. And they're struggling with that disconnect because all those front lines of pyramid, right? All those people at the front, there's more of them, and they're not engaged. And when they're not engaged, they're not doing their best work. And this type of office, fractional and avoiding, launch, and abandon really helps you make sure that you keep those people engaged, elevate them so everybody moves forward together. So it's about engagement. It's about minimizing burnout. It's about keeping turnover down. It's not just about innovation in the fluffy sense of we need people to be innovative to solve problems. It really is about engagement and motivation, productivity, collaboration between teams so stuff gets done and objectives are met. Okay, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's the bonus one that I could not avoid, which was launch and abandon. And so you're welcome for sharing that. And thank you for that. And I want to tell you that what's funny about it is I had my 4 and they're very tactical because I really, I feel very strongly about giving people things they can do immediately. And then I wrote my notes out, and then I walked away and took a shower and was like, oh my God, none of this matters if you're not continually putting the effort in. And so I had to come with that one. So I'm glad that resonated with so many of you. All right. You ready for the 4 that I originally planned out? Let's do it. Okay. Number 1 is allow the trap that people come into, especially leaders, is allowing problems to move up the ladder. Allowing problems to move up the ladder. Here's what I mean by this. What I see in cultures that squelch innovation and that create these mindless followers instead of high-performing everyday innovators is that they have accidentally, to trap, trained their people to not solve problems, but to push them up the ladder. And then the leaders, all they end up doing is spending their times putting out fires. So they're not doing the meaningful strategic work. So people at the lower levels, the teams at the lower levels are becoming mindless followers, and they're not solving problems. They're not seizing opportunities. They're not bringing ideas up, the ideas that leaders need. And the leaders at the top are spending so much time solving problems that they're not being strategic, which is really what we need from them. They're not making decisions. They're not thinking about forward progress. They're too busy solving problems. So I remember another years ago story, just to age myself. I feel like everything I say is years ago now, but you get the point. So what happens when you have 25 years of experience under your belt? So I came into this firm, this global brand strategy and innovation firm, and I came in as VP. And part of my job was culture. Part of my job was new business. I actually had to bring in millions in revenue. And then part of it was leading the teams and leading the work. So a lot on my plate, but every VP does. I think if you're out there, like we all have a lot on our plates. So I'll never forget when I first got there, I had my office. People were just constantly coming into my office with problems. This happened. This client said this. What about this? This consumer research, this happened, right? It was all new product development, brand strategy, innovation, like new product stuff. Super fun. I love new products. Love new products. And I still do a little bit of it today if the fit is right, because I love them so much. But what I noticed is people would come into my office over and over and over with their problems. And at first I was answering them because I wanted to be part of the team. I wanted to make my mark in the company. And then I realized this wasn't just people coming to me because I'm the new person on the block or because they couldn't figure it out themselves. It's because they were trained not to. So I started to notice that my work was suffering because I was spending so much time in this open door policy. By the way, I'm not actually a big fan of the open door policy. If you want me to talk about that, we can. I think in essence, I think it minimizes deep work. I think that's a problem. So I realized though that this was a problem. So people were trained not to solve their own problems. And so I switched my approach. I couldn't tell people, don't just come in, right? Figure it out on your own. You're on your own. You're on an island. Because I had to train them into solving their own problems. So I started by, instead of solving their problems when they came into my office, by asking them questions. So one person would come in and say, the client said this. And I'd say, well, what do you think they meant by that? Well, what do you think you could do about that? Well, what solutions do we have available to us? Well, what's the problem that caused that problem that we might need to solve so it doesn't keep coming back, right? I would ask them questions that would force them to start thinking about their solutions. And what I noticed over about a 3-month period is that people stopped coming into my office. First, they're like, it was the same. And then I'd ask them questions, we talk and they go back. Then it was, fewer times and it was fewer of them. Then before I knew it, unless it was a big problem that really needed to be pushed up to leadership, they weren't bothering me with them anymore because they were solving them on their own. And guess what? As it turns out, they were solving them better than I was anyway, because they're the ones with their sleeves rolled up doing the work. So I was able to get to my deep work and my strategic work. They were able to serve the clients in a really meaningful way. Now, here's the thing that you need to know about this approach. It takes time. So when you first start training people not to be followers, but to be everyday innovators, to be leaders, to be high performers, what you're going to find is that it takes you, the person doing the training, more effort. I had to spend a lot of time with those questions and conversations. I had to be patient. And you know what? Here's the trick, by the way. It was super frustrating because sometimes I'm pretty sure I knew the answer, right? I'd be like, oh, just do this or call this person or, do this approach. And I could have saved us both a lot of time, but I wasn't in the long run making decisions or helping the team build a culture of innovation from the ground up, helping them drive their own everyday innovator mindset and tools, right? I wasn't helping them be a strong team. I was just training them to be mindless followers. So yeah, it took me a lot of time on the front end, but it was 100% worth it on the back end. And it will be for you as well. The other thing my favorite client said, no, someone's asking if I'm going to share his name. Not today. I didn't ask him for permission to share our conversation. So next time I talk to him, it was a little bit of an off the record conversation. But he also said, we keep making this mistake of thinking culture and innovation, like getting people engaged, comes from the top down or is an initiative or a process, but it's not. It bubbles up from the bottom. So we got to work with people at all levels to get everybody to elevate. I was like, yes, this is why he's my favorite client. So give people the room to fail. Take the time to let them figuring out on their own. Even when you know the answer, avoid the trap of allowing those problems to bubble up and creating mindless followers. You want everyday innovators on your team. You want people who are solving problems, who are thinking strategically and being innovative. You don't want people who are just checking things off and afraid to try. Now, there's a little bit of a trick to this, which is you got to give people room to fail, because if they think there's going to be a major consequence if they get it wrong, they're never going to be comfortable being uncomfortable. They're never going to be comfortable taking those risks and making those decisions. So you got to find out in your organization your risk tolerance. You got to elevate it probably or increase it. And you got to figure out how to give people room to make mistakes. Look, unless you're a brain surgeon, I'm pretty sure, a open heart surgeon, I'm pretty sure a couple mistakes here and there are not that big of a deal. And guess what? If you make all the small mistakes, you tend to avoid the big ones. It's when you don't have the ability or you don't know how to make the small ones that you make the big ones. But people won't do it if they think there's no room. So we don't want the trap of mindless followers. We want high-performing everyday innovators in our team, and we want them to be out there, the ones doing the work, figuring things out, not pushing it all up. And we want to free our own time as leaders to be strategic, to do the deep work. Okay, I've gotten like 10 questions in about what's up with the open door policy. Why don't you like it? My company has that. Should we get rid of it? Okay, Linda, great question. Linda's like, help. Every day is open door in my company. I feel like I never get anything done. What do I do? So here's what I started, because this was at the same company. I had the same issue where open door, people thought it meant collaboration and innovation. Okay, this is another bonus for you, by the way, because this was not in here. It just kind of came out. Here's the thing. It actually kills innovation and collaboration because nobody gets anything done, right? Nobody ever is working because they're too busy with this open door. So it creates mindless followers. But here's the other thing. It doesn't allow you to do deep work, because if you're constantly interrupted, it takes your brain time to switch back. I think research showed is 5 to 7 minutes to switch from task to task. So if you're constantly being interrupted, then you can't focus and get into that state of deep work. And you need that to be strategic and innovative and to get the things done that are on your plate. It's why you feel like at the end of the day, you didn't get any of the important stuff done. And they always say, do the important stuff first. Well, I'm a believer of that, but you can't do that if people are interrupting you all the time. So at this company that I was sharing the same story before, this global strategy and innovation firm, what I used to do is I implemented something called Sasquatch. And what that meant, because we were trying to make a big impact, right? Big footprint. So what that meant is if I had the Sasquatch symbol, I had these little like door tags made up on my door, you were not allowed to bother me unless it was like, my God, the building is burning down urgent, which by the way is 1 in a million, right? That someone has something that urgent. And so I'd put that on my door, and everybody was allowed 2 hours of Sasquatch time. So 2 hours of deep work. And the reason we did it in 2 hours is because we weren't ready, much like I was training people not to solve their own problems, not to be mindless followers. I had to train people to do deep work. And they're all capable of it. They just weren't in the habit of doing it. It's not because they were dumb. It's not because they were shallow people. They just weren't in the habit of it. And so 2 hours was reasonable, right? In 2 hours, if you still had a problem you needed to come to me with or a thing you needed to discuss with me, I'd be available in 2 hours. So I wasn't taking the whole day from you. See the point? So start, Linda, with 2 hour increments. And then we went up to 3. And then some people would have it on their door for a whole afternoon. Like, great, go do that deep work. Do high quality work. I want that. So if you're in a culture where people think open door policy means collaboration and innovation, really what it means is lack of deep work, shallow work. You never get anything done. And it means you're constantly being interrupted. But 2 hour increments is really helpful. And so we had, the way our office was set up, we had offices for VPs and president. And then we had a kind of open bullpen, right? The cubes. And so they would put a Sasquatch statue up, and it meant to bother them because, if you're in an open environment, which I think, Sarah, you said, if you're in an open environment, it's even harder. So hard. And nobody seems to care that you have headphones on, right? No matter how big the headphones are. So that was our cue that, like, if I walked into the bullpen and Sarah, you had your Sasquatch statue up, I was not allowed to bother you again, unless it was absolutely urgent, which is so rare. It's so rare that something is that urgent. So that's my open door issue. It's just a bunch of interruptions. I don't like it. Okay. Oh my gosh. 2 bonuses and a 1 done. I got 3 more. All right, the second one is the trap that I find is that we make decisions in the conference room. Here's what I mean. There is a chasm in innovation between presentation and real world, right? It's like 2 cliffs and a huge gap in between. And what I find is that the most innovative, wildest, but probably most impactful ideas, innovative ideas, and whether that's for internal workflow or products to market, whatever it is, they look crazy in the conference room, crazy. But yet in the real world, they're the ones that we admire the most, aren't they? Think about the brands and the products you love. They're the ones that dared to be different, the ones that stood out from the crowd. But those same ideas look absolutely crazy in the conference room. So I'm a big fan of killing the culture of presentation for a culture of experimentation. So to me, presentation, PowerPoint, is where ideas go to die. They just look crazy. You cannot make that idea look good. And then all of our reasons why something won't work bubble up. Yet in the real world, it's probably brilliant. I'll give you a short example. So Tough Mudder, which you may know, right? It's that kind of crazy competition where you go through shock wires and what else do? You jump into something called the Arctic Enema, which is like this big tub of ice water that you have to dunk on under. It like makes you walk out looking like you just shriveled up. It's horrible. So when the founders of it were at Harvard, he wrote out this proposal for this idea called Tough Mudder, this, team sport, badge of honor. It's not about the time. It's about, pushing your physical and mental capabilities. It's about, challenging yourself. It's about teamwork, right? It was all about teams, no like Tough Mudder left behind. And so he was at Harvard. He presented this at his in a business competition. So he presented his business case. Now, the people at Harvard who are brilliant minds thought it was the worst idea ever. They're like, it'll never work. You'll have no customers. Nobody wants this. Now, at the time, it was all individual sports, marathons, triathlons, right? Trail races, bicycling. Now, all those are super hard. Don't get me wrong. I think they're all really hard. I've tried Ironmans a few times now, not well. So I know they're hard. But there was nothing in this kind of team badge of honor with like these crazy obstacles in it too. The Spartans and all the other stuff that's now out there didn't exist yet. In fact, Tough Mudder really started that category. So they told him, nope, never work. Nobody will go for it. Bad idea, right? In the conference room on paper, it looked crazy. But he believed in the idea. So he gathered $6,000 in a Facebook ad in one event, and I think it was Pennsylvania. Sold out, right? He tested his idea. He experimented. Now, maybe at the time it would have bombed, but he would have known. He would have spent $6,000 in time and known. Conference room, though, looked crazy. In the real world, turned into a multi-billion-dollar global business, launched a category, a whole category. Spartans in there now. There's the Everest challenge with Jesse Eisen, whatever his name is, right? Where you climb a mountain like 15 times to simulate going up the elevation of Everest. Stuff didn't exist. Conference room is not the place to be innovative. the real world is. So if you're in a company and you've got ideas, I'm all for a quick presentation of like, here's what I'm going to do, but it's all about experimentation, bringing things to life. Find a corner of the office where you can test the idea. Go to a client and tell them about it. You don't have to have $6,000 an event to test. Just get some duct tape and some pens and make it happen. You can test things at a lot of different levels. And here's the beauty of it. When you get out of a culture of presentation and into a culture of experimentation, you not only drive innovation, but you also learn and adapt as you go. So your ideas on the back end are better. They're stronger. They are way more battle tested. And guess what? Different everyday innovator archetypes thrive at different parts of experimentation. So you get a team behind you and you'll have whole thinking, like looking at things from all different perspectives. So you got to get out of the culture of presentation. It kills the best ideas every time. Okay. Number 3 is, and I want you to hang on until number 4, because number 4 is like something you're going to do the minute you get off this call or off this call. You have many webinars or web calls I'm on all day off this podcast. All right. This is about the innovation loop. So I was keynoting once for a group of entrepreneurs and small business owners. And by small, I mean probably 5 million, 1 million to 5 million. And one of them, in the middle of talking, I'm talking about kind of innovation and gathering ideas. She raises her hand, just starts talking, like just the whole room kind of went, what? So funny. But it was so great because it's such an important point what happened in this conversation. She raises her hand and she says, I don't understand. I have a black box. Literally, she said black box. I have a black box that people can submit ideas in, but everything I get is junk. Like, it's not even good ideas. And I said, well, what do you do with them? And she said, nothing. I said, well, do you read them? She goes, sometimes. And I know you're laughing. I can see the comments coming in of like, well, no wonder nobody gives her ideas. Exactly, right? She didn't even see it. She didn't see it. So I think she meant well, right? She started by like, hey guys, I want your ideas. But then she treated them with such disrespect and judgment on the back end that nobody submitted them. We can't ask for ideas from our teams without closing the loop on the back end. So here's what I mean by that. So this is actually, you can see it behind me maybe. Yeah, right there. My book, Innovation is Everybody's Business. And there's a whole thing on the innovation loop, right? We have to ask, right? We have to ask people for submissions. Hey, I'm working on this problem. Hey, what's your best idea? Sometimes they're super specific. I'm trying to solve XYZ problem. Sometimes it's not about specific. Sometimes it's like, just what are your best ideas? You're doing the work. What do you think? We need to gather it. We need to have a smaller team that kind of shuffles through them, right? And sees what's in there. But here's where it's really, this is where this woman was absolutely failing. Aside from judging the ideas, I also asked her, well, what happens after someone submits? And she goes, nothing. So that's the gap. This is the trap. We forget to communicate back. People don't need to be right, but they do need to feel valued and heard. It is so important. And so when we don't communicate back with people that we at least received their ideas, they are unlikely to continue to give you more. You can, yes, that is a small dog in the background. I have 3 dogs with me today. So you never know what's going to happen in the background with my dogs. It's a crapshoot. So my point is with this innovation loop is you got to ask, but then you've got to spend the time to look at every single one of them without judgment like that. Now, here's the thing. At that stage, when you're kind of looking at them, criteria, right, when you're assessing, some are going to move forward and some are going to move aside. And that's okay. But you got to go back to everybody that submitted and say, here's why we're moving forward with this idea or not. Here's why we're not moving forward with yours. Hey, we'd love you to do some more research on this. Hey, how, this isn't moving forward this time. And here are the 5 reasons why. People need to be valued and heard. And so with this woman that kind of interrupted, it was so funny, interrupted my keynote, the challenge was she didn't hear people. And she didn't go back to them and say, hey, Greg, I got your idea. We're not going to go forward with it for XYZ reasons, but I'm so glad you submitted. Keep it up. So when in my teams, any company I've run, any fractional officer that every company I'm a part of, because I'm fully invested in their success, right? I'm like 100% a part of every company I work with. I make sure that when we do some type of innovation, when we're gathering ideas, that we are also going back Yes, yes, Carrie, it takes me time. But guess what? We get better and stronger and more quantity of ideas with every innovation loop that we do, every kind of gathering that we do, because people feel valued and heard. So I need those ideas. You need those ideas. We all need those ideas to drive innovation, to keep up in chaotic, commoditized, changing times. So we can't afford not to. So we've got to not just ask, we've got to then pull them all together, but then we've got to assess, right? We got to move some ideas forward. Not every idea should go forward. I'm not a fan of that. And then we've got to communicate. Okay. We've got to go back to our teams and say, this is what we do. So I was talking to another client that's part of our ecosystem. And we have a team. So I'm that fractional officer, and then I've got a team of people that I'm kind of with on a regular basis. Like we're kind of like a cohort, I guess. And so what I did was, and this is something, Carrie, you can do about, like, I don't know if I have the time to go back to everybody. Of course not. So there's a couple ways you can do, well, not of course not. I don't want to say that. It depends on the company and number of ideas and how they come in. But there's a couple things that you can do. Number one is we do a town hall meeting every quarter where we talk about the ideas we're moving forward and strategically why, and why we're not moving forward with some of the other, and the themes that came out of those other ideas. So we can't, in this case, always go to everybody because of the size and scope of what we're dealing with, but we can very clearly articulate why we're moving forward with some and what those themes and patterns came out and what we're thinking about and what we heard from everybody. Do you see my point here? Right? So town hall. There's another team that I work with that, again, we have like a cohort, but it's small enough that everybody on the team is responsible for their team. So anybody on their team that brings forward ideas, they have to go back and say, hey, thank you. And right, here's why we're moving forward or not moving forward. That personal touch is really important. People want to know that they were heard. They really want to know. So that's the trap, is we miss the back end of the innovation loop. And then we wonder why no innovation is coming in. Well, if people don't feel valued and heard, you're not getting shit. That's the reality. Okay, the final one, now that we've covered way more than I expected to, is a word. And this word kills innovation. Anybody know what the word is? You've probably heard me talk about it a little bit. There's a word that kills innovation and a word that fosters innovation. You ready for it? Some of you got it. Exactly. The word but. But negates everything that came before it. So it kills the conversation. It accidentally puts people on the defensive, because, like, if I say to you, if you come to me, Paul, and you say, hey, Tamara, I have this idea for this energy drink, and blah, 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 and I'm thinking we could launch it in January. And my response is, yeah, but we have these 3 other initiatives going on and money is tight and you're also doing this. Yeah, right? Exactly, Paul. I've shut you down. Whereas if I say, yeah, and we've got these other things launching and you're doing this, so how would we make that all work, right? I'm continuing the conversation. Now, I'm not saying you should yes and in agreement. In fact, what yes and does is allow the conversation, the debate to keep going instead of shutting it down. Where but shuts everything down. People don't feel valued, they don't feel heard, and the conversation stops. So you don't actually get to the nuggets of gold. Where with yes and, you get to the nuggets of gold, and it's just received differently. I had someone in a keynote say, I'm going to take this personally. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, look at the difference here. This is what I normally say to my husband. Honey, I love you, but can you take out the trash? Which is like negating the I love you. She said, from here on, I'm going to say, honey, I love you, and can you take out the trash? So now you're saying both, right? Elaine, I have an idea I really want to move forward with. Here's a decision I'm making. Yeah, but if we move forward with that, then we have to deal with this, and we're going to go have to get approval with that person. It's like shuts me down. But if you say, yeah, and we're going to have to do this, and we should get, like, think about getting approval from this person, I'm like, okay, the conversation's continued. So it's not about consensus, but it is about real collaboration and innovation. Yes, and can change the conversation, and it actually changes cultures. Okay, so we covered avoid, launch, and abandon. It's a continuum of work. Avoid creating mindless followers, right? Allowing those problems to bubble up. Create everyday innovators, high-performing everyday innovators. Don't do the open door policy in the traditional way. Create some Sasquatch time. Kill the culture of presentations and build a culture of experimentation. Close the innovation loop, right? It's that feedback back, that conversation back. And use yes and instead of yes but. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I know some of you came in from across the globe too, so I appreciate you. Yes, this will be, you can listen to this again. First of all, it's on YouTube, so you can listen to it and watch it anytime on YouTube because it's already there. And today we actually streamed on LinkedIn as well because this topic in particular, I think is really important to a lot of the people in our community on LinkedIn. And then tomorrow it'll go live across all the podcast players. So yes to all of the above. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, call the hotline. Go to gotolaunchstreet.com. Put in your questions. Call the number, the 720 number on there. It's on the podcast page. And then I can play your questions. You can call them in as you or anonymously if you'd like. But remember, it's that collective wisdom that I love so much. It's so important to all of us. And here's the thing. Think of it as not being selfish. Think of it as being helpful because your question is probably something that somebody else is dealing with. So you asking helps not just you, but everybody else. All right, everybody. Peace out. Great podcast. Good to see you.